listening to She Rises, a podcast dedicated to women who are ready to stop settling and start living their lives by design. If you're ready to talk about the stuff that weighs you down and get practical advice on everything from your health, body image, spirituality, relationships, and personal growth, then you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Giovanna Capozza, your host, master coach, spiritual teacher, and mind-body expert, and I'm on a mission to unsettle women all over the world. Are you ready to rise? Everyone, welcome back to another episode of She Rises. I'm your host, Giovanna Capozza, and I want to thank you again for coming back and listening to me and to my guests and just and even sharing the podcast. So many of you have left me such wonderful comments and feedback about the podcast and how they've impacted you, and especially how they've impacted the people you've shared them with. So I so appreciate you coming back time and again. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. I'm Giovanna. You can read more about me at SheRisesPodcast.com. And this show is about relationships. And aren't all my shows really about relationships? And stay with me here. This is what I mean. Everything is about relationships. In fact, everything is a relationship. And this show is going to be diving into that topic a little bit deeper, but I'm going to just drop a couple of seeds first because I want you to consider this. If you are struggling right now in any area of your life, it could be at work, it could be with a coworker, it could be with your boss, it could be your team, right? So maybe you run a team and you're a supervisor of a team, or you're managing a team and there's conflict or lack of communication. It could be that you're in a relationship, romantic. You are searching for a relationship. There's stuff going on with family, friends. Look at all areas of your life, including and especially the relationship you have with yourself. How's your health? How are your habits? How are you feeling about yourself? Do you look in the mirror every day and find flaws? Are you waiting for something to happen in your physical appearance in order for you to be loved, take that vacation, or finally go for the thing you want to go for? If you're suffering from, when this happens, I will sort of syndrome, then all of that is about relationship. Heck, even the fact that I'm sitting on a chair right now and I'm speaking to you guys through this beautiful technology that we have, I'm in relationship to the room I'm in. I'm in relationship to the chair I'm sitting on. I'm in relationship to the microphone that I'm speaking into. So if you think about it from a macro perspective, everything is about relationship. So if you want more fulfillment in any area of your life, the first place to start is with relationship. How are you in relationship with that area of your life? How are you in relationship with yourself? Because as I said, ultimately, that is the primary relationship. So here's the thing. I have a little model that I work with. Started off as a circle. I think it's become more of a triangle now. I'm fiddling with the shapes of it. But the model is this, that there are two primary relationships in your life, that if you get these right, and if you solely focus on these to the point of, or to the exclusion rather, of all others, that everything in your life will work. And you're probably thinking, yeah, right, right? You're probably thinking, that's crazy. How could I focus on two relationships? And if I get those right, everything else works? Well, I'll tell you why. Your first primary relationship is your relationship to source or spirit or universe or God or goddess or whatever you're comfortable using. That is your first primary foundational relationship. Your second primary foundational relationship would be the relationship to yourself. So how are you caring for yourself? How are you nurturing yourself? Are you carrying around shame or guilt or past wounding or unconscious ways of being that are sabotaging the things that you say that you want? With the relationship to source, do you actually have a relationship to source? Or are you doing what I did for over 20 years, which is walk around saying I'm spiritual? But really what that meant is that I had really cool crystals in my house and I burned incense, and occasionally if I had time, I'd meditate. I did all the trainings, I did all the classes and workshops. And of course I was spiritual. I was doing all that stuff, right? Until the shit hit the fan and I realized I didn't even have a relationship with this thing I called spirituality. There was nothing or nowhere I felt I can lean on. My faith muscle, as it were, was not in place. In fact, I didn't have any evidence of that in my life because I didn't take the time to actually cultivate that relationship. And so when shit hit the fan and everything in my life blew up, relationship, career, finances, everything, and I literally was alone in Australia on the other side of the world, that primary relationship, those two primary relationships, were the place that I had to start because I, like so many of you, was working backwards. You see, I was trying to get my relationships right on the outside, right? So I was trying to make sure I had the perfect figure in the mirror. I had to make sure that I was, fit the way I wanted to be fit. I had to make sure that I had the guy and that I was getting love from him and that I was feeling validated and important by that. I had to make sure that my career was in place and that that was validating me and that was making me feel like I was worth something and that was significant. And so I looked backwards. I looked at the backwards way in. I was looking out instead of looking in. And so my relationship to others and other, meaning the world around me and outside of me, became my primary focus. But guess what, guys? That's the very top of the triangle, or rather the bottom of the triangle, because that is only the result. Okay, I'm going to say that again. It's only the result. Everything that happens on the outside is only and only the result of getting those two primary foundational relationships right. Now, what do I mean by right? Well, there is no right or wrong, right? So there's no like, well, you did that wrong. Your relationship to spirit is wrong. Well, it's not about right or wrong in the traditional sense, in the polarized sense, but it's getting it right. What I mean by that is making that your priority, making, cultivating those two relationships and really feeling strong and feeling that sense of peace in those relationships. That is what's going to make them, quote unquote, right. When those two primary relationships are solid, everything else in your life will work better. Now, I am not doing the new age promise of you will manifest manna from heaven and it'll just fall on your lap and you'll never have problems again and blah, blah, blah. No new ageism here, guys. Let's get real. Your life is still going to have problems, right? You're still going to have challenges. Like people will still cut you off in traffic. You might have a bill that comes that's too high. The guy you're dating or the woman you're dating might break your heart, or things will happen, right? Life is life. But, and when you have these two primary relationships foundational and really working for you, right? Those things will happen. And here's the key word. You will be better resourced to handle them. Your capacity to handle challenge and to overcome challenge will be reinforced by the sheer fact that you focused on these relationships. So I want to say that again. Sometimes in life, we encounter challenges, and they could be at work, they could be in our career, they could be in any sector of our life, financial or otherwise. And we feel like if one more thing happens, I am just going to bust, right? Like if one more thing goes wrong, I'm such at that level of burnout and I've just overextended myself so much that if one more thing happens, I'm going to lose it. And that is the level of lack in your resources, let's say, and lack in capacity that will be remedied when you are getting those other two primary relationships right. When you are feeling a strong connection to your relationship, to a higher intelligence, to your intuition, to that guiding force and principle that literally walks with you. There's a line in A Course in Miracles that's so beautiful, it gives me shivers every time I read it. If you only knew who walked with you, you would never be alone again. You'd never fear again. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. But if you only knew who walked with you, do you know who or what walks with you? Do you know that entity? Do you feel it? Do you have a relationship with it? Do you trust it? Do you listen to it? And for those of you that are like, you're not into the whole God, spirit, source, goddess, universe thing, it's your higher intuition. It's your higher self. It's that guiding intelligence that knows better than your small human egoic thinking, right? That's full of survival fears. Do you have a relationship with that, right? Do you have a relationship to yourself where you're not a perfectionist, where you're more self-nurturing, where you're focused on healing your shame and your guilt from the past, when you don't strive for such perfectionism that it's disguised as I'm striving for excellence, right? I'm just a go-getter. I'm just an achiever. I just want to do well. Well, that's great. Do all those things, but be honest with yourself, because if those drivers are coming from an unlovable place, right? If they're coming from a place where you essentially don't feel you're enough, then you're going to get exhausted and you're going to feel burnt out, and you won't have the capacity or resourcefulness when shit hits the fan. You won't be kind to yourself. You'll be, self-flagellation was basically, I basically took it to an art form. So guys, I'm talking to you from experience here. I have a PhD in being hard on myself. So I know who I'm speaking to here, and I know what I'm speaking of. Am I completely cured? Absolutely not. I am such a work in progress here, people. So I am not preaching to you from some high soapbox. But I really, really want you to get this, because it's just, and I hope you can hear the passion in my voice here, because I feel so strongly about these two primary relationships. All your other relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, work-related, your teams, anything, your relationship to the way you treat your body, everything else, all your other relationships will work better when these two primary relationships are right, when they're working, when you are resourced, when you have capacity, when you trust yourself so implicitly that you know when your boundaries are being crossed and you know when to express what your needs are. When you are so self-compassionate and self-nurturing that if you've stayed up late one too many nights working on that project, that you can step back and give yourself a break, that you can go do something for yourself that's nurturing, even if it's just sitting quietly and listening to some music. Being resourced and having capacity to deal with what life throws at you, and especially, and I'm talking to you career-driven, focused, amazing, successful women who I know listen to this podcast, who I've talked to lately, because I'm interviewing women about a program I'm creating about relationships. I know you're listening. And if you're still struggling to trust yourself with relationships, to find a relationship that feels fulfilling to you, to trust that you won't lose all that beautiful independence and self-sufficiency and amazing Wonder Woman-ness that you've created, you will be better resourced and better capable to not only choose the best partner for you, but to behave in that relationship in such a way that it's mutually beneficial, where you're showing up vulnerably. Finally, I know it's scary, but you're showing up vulnerably, probably for the first time ever in your life, and you're able to express your needs and take in another person's needs and give those back. And I want that for you. I really, really want that for you. I want you to be able to get into a space that you're achieving and working and achieving success, but not from a driver that no longer serves you, one that tells you you're not enough, one that tells you you're not lovable. And so everything is about relationships. Relationships are everything. The relationship we have to our environment is really key lately, right? You see how that works in the world. The relationship you have to politics, the relationship you have to your phone, people. Everything is about relationship. And so I hope I've given you a little bit of insight into my philosophy today, but I mostly hope that this show has helped you start to step back and say, wait a second, do I have these two primary relationships right in my life? Am I actually focused on them? Am I actually cultivating capacity and resilience and trust and faith and self-nurturing and self-healing in those two areas? Are those actually two areas that I'm actively working on? Or am I still looking to get filled from the outside in? And if that's all you get from this episode is that simple pondering of if that is how you're living your life, then I've done my job. because my podcast, my hope is that I ask more questions than I give you answers, right? That the things that make you go, right? If I'm quoting Arsenio Hall from way back in the 80s. Yes, I've aged myself, people. But it's the things that make you go, am I doing that? Do I need to focus on that area more? And if that's all that I've done in this episode is make you think and make you sit back and wonder whether you're focused on the right two primary relationships, or if your primary focus is on the relationships outside of you, filling you from the outside in, then I've done my job. Because if you are doing it that way, it's likely why you're exhausted. It's likely why you feel lonely. It's likely why you just feel like you're not getting this thing called life right. And even though there's no right or wrong, I know that feeling. I know that feeling where it feels like, God, just every area of your life just feels meh. And when we're looking at the wrong place for fulfillment, we are going to constantly end up with that feeling. So, things that make you go, more questions than answers here again, folks. And again, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your feedback. Like, how did this episode impact you? Are you focused on those two primary relationships, or are you still looking outside of yourself, at your career, at your dating life, at your romantic life, at your husband or your wife or whoever? Are you still looking outside of you for the love and validation and respect and significance and success that really, really ultimately comes from the inside out? And if you are, maybe we should talk. There's an application on my website under Work With Me. I would be happy to review your application and see if it's a right fit for us to get on the phone and have a conversation. There might be a way that we can open up some gaps and I can help you see around some blind spots. And if not, that's okay too. I really hope you share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from hearing these words. And most of all, again, I'd love to hear your feedback. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Whatever you're doing, God bless. Thank you so much for tuning in, and keep rising, everyone. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure you head over to sherisespodcast.com, and I'll see you there. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you tune back in next week when I dive into more juicy topics to help make your life the best it can be. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to the show and you love it, head on over to iTunes and leave me a rate and review and subscribe there to the show.